Welcome back to Roll Credits, the podcast where film fans dig into the trivia behind the titles. Today we're diving into Captain America, Brave New World, the next chapter in the Cap legacy. From casting news to behind-the-scenes tidbits and comic book connections, we're breaking down what we know so far and what has us hyped. All right, let's jump right into this deep dive. We're tackling Captain America, Brave New World, which is a pretty huge deal, right? It's Sam Wilson's first feature film as Cap.
It really is, and we've pulled together quite a bit of source material for this one. We're looking at trivia sites, cast guides, production details, even, music analysis and fan discussions from places like Reddit.
Yeah, a whole stack of stuff.
So our mission, really, for you listening, is to kind of cut through all that noise.
Right.
We want to pull out the key facts, the connections, the insights that help you really get what this film is about. Where Sam fits in now, its place in the whole MCU picture.
Exactly, because the basic setup is Sam's taken the shield, he's Captain America now, and boom, he's straight into a massive challenge. The sources suggest it involves, well, the new president, Thaddeus Ross, and the return of a classic villain we haven't seen in ages, the Leader.
Yeah, that core tension between Sam and President Ross seems to be the real driving force based on what we've read.
Okay.
And what's fascinating is that it's not just like political disagreement. The sources say it's being actively stirred up, manipulated by Samuel Stearns, the Leader.
From The Incredible Hulk. I almost forgot about him.
Exactly. He's back and apparently pulling the strings much more central this time.
Okay, so let's talk about the players then. Obviously, Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, fully embracing the Cap role.
Right.
But the big news is Harrison Ford stepping in as Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross.
Huge casting.
Yeah.
Taking over from the late William Hurt, which is significant in itself.
And the sources confirm he does become Red Hulk.
That's what they indicate, yes.
Yeah.
Red Hulk is reportedly in the film, a major comic book thing finally happening.
Wow. Okay. And Tim Blake Nelson is back as Stearns, the Leader.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing him return after that little tease way back in Incredible Hulk, with the gamma exposure.
Right.
The sources position him now as the main antagonist.
Yeah.
Specifically manipulating Ross, kind of pushing him towards that Red Hulk transformation. It ties up a loose end from way back.
And we've also got Carl Lumbly returning as Isaiah Bradley.
The super soldier from Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Such a powerful character. And the sources mention his history, fighting Bucky in the 50s. And he's involved in an assassination attempt in this film.
That's what's reported, yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently under some kind of brainwashing or control targeting President Ross. It deepens his tragic story, doesn't it?
It really does. And Sam's not alone, right? Joaquin Torres is back.
Danny Ramirez, yeah. Stepping up as the new Falcon. Sam's got a partner.
Good. And then there's Giancarlo Esposito.
Right. He's reportedly playing Sidewinder, leader of the Serpent Society.
Okay, Serpent Society. That's a deep cut.
Definitely. Sources also mention Saoirse Roquemore as the head of Secret Service, Layla Taylor, and Johannes Hawker Johannesson as Copperhead, another Serpent Society member. So a mix of comic characters and government types.
All right, let's get into the plot points reported in the sources. It kicks off with Ross winning the presidency.
Seems like it. And his victory speech apparently makes direct reference to past MCU events, specifically the snap.
Okay, standard stuff.
But also something called the Celestial Mass.
Ah, from Eternals, the giant space god sticking out of the ocean.
Exactly. So right away, it grounds the film in that slightly weirder, bigger cosmic picture of the MCU now.
I like that. Then we get some early action with Sam and Joaquin in Mexico.
Yeah. An infiltration mission down in Oaxaca is mentioned in the sources.
And that leads into this assassination attempt you mentioned, with Isaiah Bradley involved, but brainwashed.
That's the sequence described, yes. Yeah. And interestingly, the sources note that part of this was actually filmed at the U.S. Capitol for authenticity.
Wow, okay, that's bold.
Then there's this D.C. chase scene that sounds pretty cool. It reportedly starts inside a White House replica at the East Room, and then spills outside, ending up in Pershing Park.
Pershing Park. Why does that ring a bell?
Well, the sources point out two things. It's near a WWI memorial, which ties into Isaiah's soldier background.
Okay, thematic.
But it's also apparently right across the street from the diner where Sam talked to Senator Stern in Winter Soldier.
No way, the Haiju senator.
The very same.
Yeah.
A nice little geographical Easter egg connecting Sam's journey.
That's the kind of detail I love. Shows they're thinking about the history.
Absolutely. It helps anchor it.
Then the sources talk about a big action sequence, Celestial Island. So it is the Eternals Celestial.
It seems so, yes.
Yeah.
The giant one partly emerged. And the really big news from this sequence, according to the sources, is that the conflict involves adamantium reserves.
Whoa! Adamantium, like Wolverine adamantium.
That's the implication. Its first official introduction into the main MCU continuity, reportedly.
That is massive news for the future.
Huge. And during this fight, Joaquin Torres apparently gets injured.
Oh, no.
Yeah, sources say it's a moment that really hits Sam hard, makes him feel demoralized, highlights his vulnerability. He's not invincible like Steve was.
Right, he's human, which leads into the climax with Red Hulk.
Exactly. And the sources really emphasize this. Sam can't possibly win a straight fight against Red Hulk.
Stands to reason.
So instead, the focus is reportedly on Sam using his experience, his smarts, and crucially, his ability to connect with people. He supposedly talks Ross down, reasons with him.
So his humanity is his superpower, right?
That seems to be the core theme highlighted in the sources, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Empathy, reason, not just fists.
I like that. Okay, let's shift to some of the trivia and Easter eggs the sources dug up. We mentioned the celestial stuff connecting to Eternals.
And adamantium, obviously. Yeah. Huge connection to the wider Marvel universe potentially opening up.
What else? Anything smaller?
Yeah, some nice character details. Sources mentioned specific photos in Sam's apartment, a selfie with Bucky.
Oh, nice.
And a picture of Riley, his wingman who died in Winter Soldier. Little things that ground his personal history.
Good continuity.
Also, the place the leader is held, Camp Echo 1. Apparently that's a nod to a comic book facility meant for Bruce Banner.
Huh? Okay, deep cut for the Hulk fans.
And the raft is back. The prison from Civil War.
Oh, yeah. Who's in there now?
According to the sources, quite the lineup is mentioned by the end. Ross himself, the leader, Zemo.
Zemo, okay.
Willis Stryker, Diamondback from Luke Cage.
Ooh, Netflix connection.
Seems like it. And Trish Walker from Jessica Jones.
Seriously, they're pulling them onto the raft.
That's what's reported. Plus a mention of some unseen prisoner just reading a book. Intriguing.
That is intriguing, and it really connects different corners of the MCU.
And just revisiting Isaiah Bradley, his whole backstory as a super soldier, that fight with Bucky in the 50s.
Yeah.
It all builds on Falcon and Winter Soldier, expanding the history.
Certainly feels like they're weaving things together. What about behind the scenes? Sources mentioned reshoots.
Yes, extensive reshoots were reported. Now, Kevin Feige gave the standard line, reshoots are normal, we use them to refine things.
Right, the usual Marvel statement.
And Anthony Mackie reportedly echoed that, saying it wasn't like a massive retooling, just standard procedure.
Mm-hmm.
But digging into some source discussions, there are suggestions, it might have been a bit more complex, mentions of a possibly chaotic production.
Uh-oh.
And even speculation that real-world events, COVID, Ukraine, the Israel-Hamas conflict, might have influenced changes or caused delays. It paints a picture of, well, a potentially tricky production.
Interesting context. What about where they filmed?
Sources note it was shot entirely in the U.S., only the second Cap movie after Winter Soldier to do that.
Oh, right.
They used some real D.C. spots like the Capitol exterior and Pershing Park for grounding.
For that authenticity.
Exactly. But a lot of the White House interiors, Oval Office, Blue Room, East Room, those were apparently detailed sets built at Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta.
Makes sense. Easier to control.
And the presidential bunker. That was reportedly a Marvel invention, not a direct replica.
Okay.
And because getting permits for extensive filming in D.C. can be tough, sources say they actually recreated bits of Washington, like the Rose Garden and even a street with the cherry blossom trees, at their home base, Trilith Studios in Georgia.
Wow, the magic of movie making, huh?
Pretty much. Blend the real and the built.
The sources also touched on the look of the film, the cinematography.
Yeah, Kramer Morgenthau shot it. The goal, reportedly, was a 1970s paranoid thriller vibe. Think Day of the Jackal or Le Samurai.
Oh, cool aesthetic. Like Winter Soldier, but maybe even more so?
Potentially. They apparently used a digital filter, a LUT, to mimic the look of old Kodak film stock, giving it that texture.
Nice.
And specific lenses were chosen, some vintage ones for character, others for versatility, and special anamorphic lenses for the IMAX sequences.
So that explains the aspect ratio switching you sometimes see.
Exactly. Bigger scope for the big action beats.
Let's talk sound. Laura Cartman did the score.
She did. And sources describe it as darker, more focused on espionage than, say, Alan Silvestri's big patriotic themes for the first Cap movie.
Makes sense for a thriller.
Yeah, rhythmic, tense. Influences mentioned include things like The Manchurian Candidate, North by Northwest, even Henry Jackman's Winter Soldier score.
So keeping some continuity there.
Seems like it. She apparently developed two main themes, a tense conspiracy theme and a more heroic but complex Brave New World theme.
and used some unique instruments.
Yeah, mentions of things like New Orleans drumline percussion, some unconventional sounds mixed in.
Interesting. What about the songs they use? Licensed music.
That seems to be a big part of it, too. Sources highlight a real focus on hip-hop, rap, and pop by Black artists.
To reflect Sam's background and culture.
Exactly. A deliberate choice to ground his character. Specific tracks are mentioned, like Keep On Movin' by B. Stu during that Waka scene for camaraderie.
Okay.
Kendrick Lamar's I reportedly plays over a hospital scene, and into the credits is described as empowering, optimistic, maybe linking to Black Panther's legacy, too.
Nice.
And Anti-Up by M.O.P. for an action scene, giving it a gritty feel.
Sounds like a strong soundtrack. But the score got mixed reactions.
Yeah. Sources mentioned some online fan discussion found the score maybe less memorable, but the licensed tracks were generally seen as really effective and fitting for Sam.
Okay, reception overall. The sources mentioned not great reviews.
Mixed to negative seems to be the consensus reported, yeah. At least one source pointed to a 49% Rotten Tomatoes score, which is low for Marvel.
Ouch. Did that lead to the whole, is this the worst Captain America movie debate?
It certainly fueled it, according to the sources.
Yeah.
But there were counter-arguments reported, too. People saying Sam still shines, and it's maybe not as bad as some other lower-ranked MCU films.
Fair enough. What were the specific criticisms mentioned?
Common ones reported were too many subplots. That Serpent Society story often came up as feeling underdeveloped or unnecessary.
Okay.
Too much exposition, and some finding the leader just not that exciting as a villain compared to, say, Red Skull or Winter Soldier or Zemo.
Right, high bar there. What about how they handled Sam's identity?
That was an interesting point of discussion found in the sources. One perspective reported was that the film kind of sidesteps his race, focusing more on the fact he isn't a super soldier. But that same source acknowledged the diverse cast and Isaiah Bradley's important storyline, which obviously deals heavily with race and history. So it sounds like there were differing interpretations reported on how central that aspect felt.
Complex issue. Anything else controversial? That IMDb thing?
Oh yeah, the minor stir about Anthony Mackie not initially being listed first in the stars section on IMDb.
Right, what was the deal there?
Sources presented different takes. Some saw it as weird, maybe disrespectful.
Yeah.
Others argued IMDb's algorithm for unreleased films often uses their Starmeter popularity ranking, and Mackie might have ranked lower at that moment than, say, Harrison Ford. They only list a few names anyway.
But can't they edit that manually?
Well, that was the counter argument from other sources, that IMDb does have internal tools to set lead actors.
Yeah.
So it just became this little online debate about algorithms versus editorial choice.
Gotcha. And the leader's look changed.
Apparently so. Sources described an earlier, more comic-accurate practical makeup with the big head, but it got scrapped.
Why?
Test audiences, maybe?
Yeah.
The final version is described in sources as more, like, generically grotesque or lumpy. It sparked debate online about which looked better and, the perennial question of comic accuracy versus screen adaptation.
Always a hot topic.
Fair.
And there was some political interpretation mentioned. Ross Red Hulk as Trump.
Yeah, some commentators reportedly made that connection, seeing Red Hulk as, like, a demagogue rampaging. One source even used the word orange-skinned, apparently.
But Red Hulk is red.
Exactly. And crucially, the source that reported on this interpretation also specifically called out that inaccuracy, labeling the comparison poor or flawed. So it was presented more as a critique of that take rather than endorsing it.
Okay, important distinction. So the film maybe avoids deep politics.
The broader criticism reported was sort of along those lines, that it maybe bumps up against relevant political themes but doesn't really engage with them deeply.
But there were positives mentioned too, right? Defenses of the film.
Oh, definitely. Sources defending it emphasize that it does cement Sam Wilson as Captain America, that his strength is his humanity and his ability to reason. And many sources did highlight Harrison Ford's performance as Ross as being pretty great.
Okay, so wrapping this all up for you, the listener, this deep dive really gives you the context for Brave New World.
Yeah, you see how it connects way back to Incredible Hulk, builds directly on Eternals and Falcon and Winter Soldier, even pulls in Civil War with the raft.
Plus, you get a sense of the creative choices that 70s thriller feel, the music, the filming logistics.
And an understanding of the different reactions, the criticisms, the defenses, the fan discussions. It shows how complex these big movies and their reception can be.
Hopefully, having all these details, the plot beats, the trivia, the behind-the-scenes stuff, the controversies, enriches how you think about the film, whether you've seen it or plan to.
Absolutely. It adds layers to the viewing experience.
Which brings us to our final thought, something to chew on. Sources report the leader has this ominous final warning for Sam. Something like,
All you heroes protecting this world, do you think you're the only ones? Do you think this is the only world? We'll see what happens when you have to protect this place from the others.
ooh, chills. What do you think that means? The others. Other worlds. Multiverse stuff.
It certainly sounds like it could be setting up bigger, perhaps multiversal threats down the line, doesn't it?
Yeah. And if Sam's power is his humanity, his reason, how does he protect Earth from threats from entirely different realities? Can you reason with forces like that?
That's the big question, isn't it? How does Captain America adapt when the threats become cosmic or otherworldly? Yeah, a lot to think about for the future of the MCU.
Indeed. That's our breakdown of Captain America: Brave New World. If you enjoyed this deep dive into trivia and teasers, be sure to follow Roll Credits and share the episode with your fellow Marvel fans. We'll be back soon with more facts, more films, and plenty more to geek out about.